Hello, everybody. I am super excited about this week's topic because we are going to talk about what success looks like for your family. And I'm going to challenge you to think more deeply about your metrics for success.
Welcome to Parenting Successful Teens, the podcast that cuts through the overwhelm and stress of this phase and offers parents simple, practical, cognitive, science-based strategies for keeping their teens on track. Join Master Coach and real-life mom, Allie Irwin, to talk about real teens, real problems, and the skills it takes to raise successful adults.
We live in a society that loves to measure things. We are, and this is true, like we measure how many steps we take in a day, and when we go to buy toothpaste, we're like 25% more toothpaste or number one dentist recommended toothpaste, right? Like we love to measure things and we love to know that we're getting the best and the most value. So we have all these measurements, and colleges, when they're looking at our kids, they have all of these measurements for what kind of student, can you hear me making the air quotes, what kind of student they want to let in. They have metrics for success. And like when we think of schools, we want our kids to go to a good school. And those good schools let in good students. And so that school's metric becomes our metric of success for our kids. And I know this to be true because you ask a parent with a child that's bound for college, why do you want your kids to get good grades? Well, I want them to get good grades because I want them to be able to get into a good school. Then you ask them, why do you want them to be able to get into a good school? And first they give you this long silence because they think you're asking a stupid question instead of helping them investigate their values. But most often the answer you get is, well, because I want them to be able to get a good job. And then you ask them, well, why do you want them to be able to get a good job? And they say, because then they'll be able to be independent and I will feel like I have done my job. So you can see, like if that's your measure about whether you have been successful as a parent, is if your child could get into a good school, then the school's measure of success becomes the measures you're using to evaluate your kids. Now, of course, I don't mean this absolutely, like we still want our children to be good people and be happy. But if you look at that college cheating scandal, where their parents like lied their way into good colleges, I read a lot of those interviews from Felicity Huffman who talked about how like the reason that she did those things that were so clearly wrong is because she had gotten really caught up in the idea that that's what a good parent would do. A good parent would help their child like do whatever it takes, even in her case, lying, to get into the certain kind of school so that her child could be viewed as successful. Okay, so it's easy to see that's an extreme example about how the school's measures become our measures of success. And I promise you, even if your child is not, even if their path is not to go on to a 4-year school after high school, your child is still swimming in this culture. My oldest did not go directly, he went to trade school after high school. And so I know from experience, even though that was not his path, he was still swimming in a culture that measured kids by things they could measure, okay? So that's an important piece, this idea that we measure the worth of our children using things that we can measure. And again, I want you to stay with me. I know that part of you is rejecting this idea because you also want them to be polite and kind to their sister and, to be a good person. But it's easy to see how the school's measures become our measures, how that just becomes part of the culture that we live in, that we're raising our families in. So what happens is there are things that we can measure, like their grade point average. And their grade point average is not a bad measurement. Like the grade point average, what it is is it's supposed to be a representation of subject knowledge, right? Like the grade that they get in a class is a proxy. All a proxy is it's a representation of something. And so that grade that they get in the class is supposed to be a proxy for their subject matter knowledge and also for their goodness as a student, right? The way you get a good grade is you follow the teacher's instructions, you manage your time wisely, you do what's asked of you, and you learn the subject material. And those are all good things. So grades in and of themselves aren't bad things. But what happens is we start to value the grade instead of understanding that the grade is just a proxy for subject matter knowledge. Okay, like the grade becomes an end in itself. And when you believe that getting an A is its own reward, like that the grade you get is really important, rather than what you learned in that class or how you learned to manage your time or how you learned to understand and follow instructions, when you think that A matter is like the most important thing, then you're tempted to cheat. Or you might misunderstand the A and think that means that a student knows the subject material really well. And maybe the student is just a good test taker. Or maybe the student that gets, we think that the student that gets an A knows more than the student that gets a C. But the student that gets an A might just be a really good test taker. And the student that gets the C might have test anxiety. Okay, they might be subject matter experts, but when you get them into the workplace, they're not the person that wants to make the big presentation. They're the people that want to do all the work that get the project done. And those are different skill sets. So the grade in and of itself doesn't tell you what we think it tells you, which is how much the person knows about the material. Okay, it's just a proxy for subject matter knowledge. And college rankings become a proxy for how good a college is. That metaphor just extends out and out and out, right? We look at what we can measure. So I want you to think about the idea that these ways that we measure students and that we measure success, which is what is a grade point, how many volunteer hours did they do, how many sports did they play? What chair were they in band? How many school productions were in? All of these things that we can measure, they're important, but they're insufficient. They're an insufficient way to look at success for our children. And the things that matter are deeper things. They're things that you as a parent have to do the work of understanding. And the reason that you want to do the deeper work is because when you don't, then you let outside people's measures of success become your measures of success. And then you end up sort of looking in the wrong place. So there's this really famous joke. There was a drunk and he was under a streetlight looking for his keys. He's just stumbling around looking for his keys. And this policeman happens upon him and he's like, "What are you doing?" The drunk's like, "I'm looking for my keys." And so the policeman starts helping him look for his keys. And they're looking and looking and they can't find the keys. And finally the policeman is like, "Are you sure you lost your keys here?" And the drunk's like, "Nah, I lost them in the park." And the policeman is like, "What are you doing then? Why are you looking for the keys here?" And the drunk says, "Well, because this is where the light is. This is where I can see." And as parents, it's really important to know where we're shining our light. Okay? As parents, it's really tempting to shine our light on things that are easy to measure. But I really want to encourage you to do the deeper work, to look at what's really your definition of success. Because when we don't, we get caught up in society's measurements of success. And society's measurements of success are so limited that only a very few children, by the nature of the measurements themselves, only a very few children can be at the top. And even those children that can be at the top, like they don't even win because of all of the pressure and all of the things that went into the things they had to go through to be there. So like our current definition of success for kids doesn't really work for anyone. And I want to encourage you again, the idea is these measurements that we're currently using to measure how our kids are doing are really just proxies for the thing that we really want, which is their success. And when we think more deeply about what our definitions of success are for our kids, then we have the opportunity to step outside of society's measurements and really focus on the things that matter to you and to your family. So I will give you the example from my family, but I want you to think up the examples from your own family, right? Because every family has different goals. So one of the things that was really, really important to me is that my kids find something that they love to do, an environment they could flourish in. But I wasn't overly specific about what that environment was because I also trusted them to walk their own path, what they wanted to do. I believed in them and then stayed focused on my idea of success, which was them thriving, rather than on the markers of success, their GPA, the ranking of the school, or whether they even decided to go to college, post-high school, or the perceived income, the expected income of their job choice. Okay, I didn't focus on any of that because those are markers of success. Those are not success. Those are markers, okay? And as a result of keeping sort of the street light of my attention focused on my idea of them thriving, I made different choices because of that, and my kids made different choices of that, and they thrived, okay? Choosing to focus on them thriving is a daily decision. So as things came up, like that's what I was measuring it against. And here's the kicker. The thing that is very counterintuitive is by focusing on them thriving, they thrived by conventional measures of success. Like even though that isn't what I was focused on, they ended up thriving by conventional measures. Okay, my oldest shot right to the top of his profession and traveled the world as an acknowledged expert in his field and is now on a completely different path back in school to do a completely different thing. And same thing with my youngest. She is graduating school this year with a 4.0 in her major from a prestigious college with a job offer and she had multiple professors tracking her down, trying to encourage her to reconsider going to grad school so she'd be a part of their program. By every conventional measure, she's extremely successful. But we didn't get there by focusing on the measures of success. We got there by focusing on the thriving, okay? By focusing on our chosen definition of success. My chosen definition of success, I was laughing as I was writing this episode, and then I went back and watched it about the final scene of Parks and Rec, and I think Leslie Knope summed it up for me really well. And it's funny because this came out right in the era, when my kids were in high school. So I may have stolen this from her. Is the best prize that life has to offer is a chance to work hard at work worth doing with people that you love. Hey, that is my definition of success. And I want to really encourage you to think about yours. Okay, then hew to that definition on a daily basis. Shine the streetlight of your intention on that definition and don't let society distract you.